Good evening and welcome to the operating room. I'm your host, Dwyer Astafan. I'm alone tonight on this side of the glass. On the other side, we have Quint, the man who keeps me on the heavy manners all the time. And with him is Gavin Bell, who is the man who has us on Facebook streaming tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, whether you're on radio or you're out there on the internet, wherever you are. We really appreciate your listenership. We do not take it for granted. Let me start out by saying hello to a lady who I saw in town today. And she ordered me to big her up tonight. So Dumpling, Manners, good night. I hope you're listening, and I hope all is well with you, and may God bless you. We thank God for you. You're a nice lady. I want to say two things from the start about workers. First, and this is good stuff, a small group of workers who believe that Operation Rescue means well have come forward with a very generous donation to help keep us on the air. One of them came to see me on Friday. She gave me a nice hug and an envelope and some words of encouragement, and she left. And when I opened the envelope, to my surprise, I saw this lovely note and the donation from her and her colleagues. I was very touched and inspired by it. We're very grateful. We appreciate it. And I want to let them know that the money has been paid into Win FM and will help to keep this program on the air. Now, these are struggling people, not rich by any means, not financially anyway. All they want in life is a fair chance. They want to lead peaceful and happy lives for their children and themselves. They want to earn their daily bread honestly and diligently. And they want, indeed, they deserve to be respected. Money is not easy for them to come by, so when they come up with this money and make it available to us, it goes to show how committed they are to having a voice. Some of them aren't sure that when they leave home in the morning that they'll get a full day's pay because their work could be cut down and they're sent home. And the conditions of work aren't the kindest to them. I wonder, from this particular experience with these workers, how many of us know the agony that so many of them endure day in, day out? I wonder if we were aware of the fact, in addition to the obvious economic damage that they suffer, that there's a whole lot of psychological and emotional damage done to workers in this country. Not all workers, mind you, but to a lot. Psychological and emotional damage. Many of them feel there's no hope. They have no strong ally, no justice available to them. So we're here in the operating room and in Operation Rescue in our own little way to help give voice to their circumstance and to their tribulations. Mind you, we aren't one-sided, but there's a lot of injustice being perpetrated in the workplace in this land, and we have to speak out and act out against it. Martin Luther King said, Dr. Martin Luther King, the revered Dr. Martin Luther King, injustice to one man is injustice to all men. Of course, like everybody else, workers must conduct themselves in a manner that commands respect from others. But that said, let me say this. There's a particular man who is here on a work permit. I've spoken about him before. Local workers have been complaining about his muscular attitude and behavior towards them. It seems their complaints have fallen on deaf ears. If he doesn't mend his ways, or if his employers do not address these issues revolving apparently around him, people like me will have to go to that workplace and start to protest and picket. I will go alone if that's what it takes. You don't need companionship when you're doing right in your conscience. So, a word to the wise. My second story about workers is this, and this is very interesting. Some workers in a particular workplace recently began speaking to the new union, the United Workers Union, headed up, of course, by Mr. Al-Wali Mohammed. They started speaking to this union, and guess what happened? Their employers offered them a 5% raise. And the employers have begun sending signals to them, indicating that they, the employers, are now contemplating improving the work conditions and the relationship between themselves and the workers. They don't want the workers to join a union. They don't want a union. They want to deal with the workers one-on-one. They want to be the workers' union. Mind you, they have their union, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Nothing wrong with that. They have their union. They also have money to pay lawyers and to pay accountants. They also have money to make political contributions. The workers, on the other hand, have nothing but their labor. And now these workers are saying, we have to come together to be stronger, not to wage war against the employer, but to be stronger so that we can obtain justice through strength, a level playing field. And now that the workers have taken this decision, the employers have found a new love for them and now want to deceive them into thinking that they, the employers, will treat them, the workers, nicely, and that the workers are better off letting the employers take care of them rather than the workers having their own membership in a union. The employers want to be the employers and still the workers' union. Now, you can't beat the two. They say they believe in justice, mind you. Some of them are even quick to criticize government for being unjust and undemocratic. But some of them want to be the employer and still be the union for the worker who they are oppressing. But that can't be just. So the workers are realizing the reason for this newfound love and respect. And the reason is simple. The union, the United Workers Union. But it doesn't have to be that union. It could be any union. So now that the workers have found this power and this new love from the other side, why would they want to give it up? They won't be so easily dissuaded against union membership and so on. I hope that this helps to galvanize workers generally into the whole movement of collective struggle, if you will, and collective success and strength through numbers, not to be combative, but to be strong and to ensure that their situations are treated by themselves and by the employers with dignity and respect. So I'm encouraging workers in the public and private sectors. Join this union, the United Workers Union. Join the St. Kitts Nevis Trades and Labour Union. As long as the party stops interfering with its union sister organization, and as long as that party gets leadership which is sympathetic to workers, not necessarily being unsympathetic to employers, not at all. But they must show some simpatico towards the workers. And this is relevant, particularly Labor Day is coming up. Everybody's going to love the workers. It's just like everybody like the ordinary people when it comes to election. Now I invite organizations like the Taxi Association, the Bus Associations, Nurses, Teachers Union, which needs a boost right now. It seems to have gone asleep since the change of government, and other professional and worker-based groups, and small and not so small business people. Hold hands in solidarity with the unions, with the workers. Operate and live as a partnership. After all of us are God's children. Some will have the means to own a big business and hire a lot of people. Others will have the means to own a small business. Some will be self-employed, and just them and mom and pop. And others will work for employers. It doesn't make anybody superior to anybody else. We all must get a fair shot at a good life and look more at need than at greed. Too much neglect. We've had too much of that. too much disadvantage, too much abuse. It has to stop. And only if there's an enlightened, self-respecting, proactive workforce in the country, enlightened, self-respecting, and proactive, and skilled in the hard skills and the soft skills, and socially and politically conscious workforce, only if those things happen will this nonsense stop. So join your union. Call Al-Wali Mohammed, the President of the United Workers Union, 661-3151. Call any other union you want to call. Join up. You'll be better off. Your employers will love you more. At least they'll respect you more. Let's take a break. Well, Singing Sandra said it better than I can say it. The war will go on. But it's a war of love, not a war of hate. Secondly, I wish to raise another matter. This one involves me, something I try to avoid discussing on this platform. But this one has a public interest component to it. And it may be helpful if I was to say something in the midst of some personal swipes that are being sent in my direction. Let me say from the outset, I'm accustomed to swipes being made at me, and more than just swipes too. I received my first death threat in this country in the 1980s. I won't give the details of it, but I recall it vividly. And I've been in the crosshairs of some vicious people, receiving their abuse, vilification, and more, fairly consistently, over the past 26 years, since I entered elective politics in 1992. I dared to challenge two prime ministers, not with any ambition to take the highest office in the land, but to put searching questions to them and the institutions and organizations which they led. And you know the result of those challenges. So some swiping and some cussing and some abusing and even some threats don't deter me. I'm not a hero. But I am one who believes that it is easier to live in the fear of doing something than to live in the fear of the consequences of doing nothing. So none of this is new to me. And none of these attackers have prevailed. They've all been vanquished. The Lord works in mysterious ways, His wonders to perform. And they've failed not because of me, but because of what I try to stand for. In my sinfulness and frailty, I try to stand for the truth and for fairness. And sooner or later, those who fight against the truth and fairness lose. I'm mature enough to recognize that when people resort to personal attacks and to try to discredit and distract, it's often because they don't have anything of substance to say, or because they're mortally afraid of the truth. Shortly before the last general elections, a group from the USA contacted me, and I'm getting to the point now, expressing an interest in the cruise pier in St. Kitts. I told them at the time the country was in election mode, and that after the election I'd be happy to work with them and approach the government, that sort of thing, to explore possibilities. And so said, so done. After the election, I told the minister that I was associated with the group, and at the same time I was very clear and told him that notwithstanding my professional interest, my overriding desire was that the best deal for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis should be made, whoever might be the party with whom the government would make that deal, whether my group or the other group or whoever else. Country above self. I did not seek to curry favor, to mislead, to induce, or to be in any other way improper. Nor did I ask anybody to be. That is not my way. I wanted a transparent and fair process and a decision which was in the best interest of the country. Now, after an extended period of time, the decision was made by the administration, and the decision was to go with the other group. Fine. I've never discussed this decision in detail in the public, nor am I about to do so now. What I did discuss in the public was the need for the country to know the essentials of the deal, given that it was not only a deal using the taxpayers' money, but also a project of major environmental, social, and economic scope and significance. It seems that somebody is upset with me for having called for details to be made public. I'm told that a messenger for the administration took to social media and launched an attack on me. On my stewardship as a government minister, I'm told that the person, I don't know whether it's a male or a female, because they write as cowards normally do under a pseudonym. I'm told that that person had said that I had not asked for details for projects in former times to be shared with the public, that I was a hypocrite, that I was to have gotten 10% of the deal and all kind of stuff like that. Well, I don't have any desire to get entangled in a silly quarrel with anybody, far less somebody's surrogate. I would be more than willing to engage any politician or anybody in the country, and I don't say that combatively. I'd be willing to engage any politician or anybody in a rational, mature discussion on the facts and on the issues of the country. Any one of them, any two of them, any three or more of them. They, me, the facts and the issues anytime. And there's no exposure for me, because it is an exercise, a search for truth, not an exercise in machismo or ego. And I'm not suggesting this because I wish to be confrontational. No. What I want is a discussion of the facts and the truth, the pursuit of the facts and the truth, good and transparent and accountable governance and responsible citizenship in the land. No abusing, none of that. I'm not interested in that. And no nonsense about 10% and that kind of stuff. Although I find it interesting that the surrogate would seek to make a case against me, that I would have gotten 10% of the deal had my group gotten the contract. Now, while that figure is fanciful and of course fictitious, let's suppose that it wasn't so. Suppose what the person is saying is true. Suppose I was to get 10% of a deal. Is the surrogate expressing dissatisfaction with that number that he says that I would have gotten? Or is he or she dissatisfied with the thought that it would be me getting the 10%, rather than some other lawyer or some other professional or some other person of his or her preference? Because we have observed in this country that people judge something to be wrong, not on the wrongness of it, but on the basis of who is doing it. And I'll tell you this, when I make $1 and I make my dollars honestly, nobody gets a kickback or a cut. Nobody cuts in. What I do with whatever few dollars I make is I look to needy people to see if I could help them come out of whatever hole they may be in. That is my record, my public record in this country, and my private and personal record. I'm not into the kickbacks and the cuts and so. And if that person is so eager to publish the story, fictitious as it is, that I, a private citizen, would have gotten 10% of a deal, why is it that he or she is so hostile to my call to the government, which is a public entity, to disclose the details of the deal? The government is the agent of the people. The government is the arm, the extension of the people. The mechanism by which people's hopes and aspirations and dreams and destiny are articulated. Is the surrogate speaking for his bosses and telling us that his bosses are not really for transparency? Are we being told that we can wait forever? We could wait forever. We won't get proper, fully operational integrity legislation or freedom of information legislation, because the surrogate is basically saying, why should the public know? Yes, we're using your money. We are the government, which is the government of the people, for the people, by the people. But we don't want any sunshine to touch the pages of the documents that can explain to the country what these deals and contracts are. If they are against these things happening, then they're going to be in for a very rude awakening, whoever they may be. And whether in the past I did or did not press for public disclosure of government documentary information, which also is not the case, then that is totally irrelevant. We are in the present, we are here now. We are expected to learn from the past. And the question is, what is the present administration doing to demonstrate its respect for the constitutional right of this country's people? The right of the people to know. It's not a privilege, you know. It's not a gift. It's not an act of generosity. People have a right to information. This government has been in office, this administration, for 3 years and 2 months. In order for them to demonstrate their commitment to good governance, they must give us open government, and we must force them to do it. Let them get vexed if they want. They wanted to run, they wanted to win, they ran and they won. Now they must show us government in the sunshine, transparency, let the people see. Let the public have access to the information, the public, so that the public can assess the stewardship of all of us, going back to me and before and up to now, past and present. Let the public see and let the public assess. What could be wrong with that? Get the public engaged in productive debate, productive, constructive discussion of the performances of people who are in office and who have been in office, which includes the publication of documents. I'm not talking about documents that are so sensitive that would challenge and threaten our national security. Obviously not. Let them see who are the good people. Let the public see who are the good people and the bad. Who are the honest ones and the hypocrites? Who are the rogues and the vagabonds? Let us all see who have served and are serving the people and who have served and are serving themselves. We have administrations in the past which have proclaimed that transparency and accountability are their hallmarks, but they all fell short of the mark. Today we have an administration that has said for sure that it will take government to that top level, governance, and from a bottom-up basis. What do the people at the bottom in St. Kitts and Nevis today, especially St. Kitts, which I know more about, what do they know today that they did not know 38 months ago about governance and about what's going on in the government? I would venture to say little or nothing. Labour people who had been silent when their leaders were leading the country astray and abusing the Constitution are now vocal as heck, accusing the present administration of doing what their leaders had done in the past. In the meanwhile, Team Unity supporters are defending today the same things that they condemned when Labour was in office. Surely, that is not an enlightened approach to living. The surrogates and some of today's high-ups used to encourage Operation Rescue to go hard when Labour was in. They used to give us information which they wanted to be put in the public square. They used to tell us, talk the thing, bang your mouth, ask the questions, expose the vagabond and them. Today, they're saying Operation Rescue must shut up. They don't want any information out. And anybody who talk, grudge and greedy and hypocrite and lie, they want to control ZIZ. They want to dominate Sugar City. They want to dominate the Observer. And they want to dominate the narrative on social media. This obsession to control the narrative reveals a desperate fear of the free and democratic flow of information. And it exposes a deep insecurity. Doesn't make a good impression on observant and objective people. The more you seek to control, the greater your obsession to control and manipulate, is the greater your insecurity and your dangerousness. If there's such a word, your danger as a leader. What am I advocating? Information sharing. Information from the government, which is the servant of the people. Information flowing from the government to the people. And I'm not asking any favor. It's not something the people should request, should have to request. It is a constitutional right. Section 12 of the Constitution says so. Freedom of information is an act that should have been passed millennia ago. You know the first country to pass freedom of information legislation? Sweden, 1766. This is 2018. First reading. No integrity legislation yet. And we must shut up. If we can't get integrity legislation, how are we going to get information? If you're hogging ZIZ, how are you going to show the level playing field that you professed and proclaimed? And we have the right to the information. But with every right, there is an equal responsibility. And we, the citizens, must ensure that we discharge our responsibility to protect our fundamental rights and our liberties and our dignity. And information is the key. We have a Procurements and Contracts Act. We don't know what's happening with government contracts. We have no IPL, as I said. We don't have any freedom of information. We have nothing. And the surrogates speak for the leaders. They don't want us to know what is our business. But we can't allow that. And when you talk, you're a hypocrite. When you talk, you grudge. But that's not going to stop me. I am a hypocrite. I'm a sinner. I'm a terrible sinner. What are you? What the heck are you? I ain't thief nothing when I was in government. I ain't victimize anybody when I was in government. Check the records. Let the public see the information, mine and yours, then and now. One of the more important framers of the U.S. Constitution was a man called James Madison. He was the American 4th president. He once said that a government which does not make its information available to the people will become a tragedy. He said that knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and that a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. That's a quote from him. Let me read it again. James Madison, the 4th president of the United States. I think he became president in the late 18th century, maybe the early 19th century. He said, government which does not make its information available to the people will become a tragedy. he also said that knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and that a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. You couldn't get it any more clearly than that. And I'll end with this. Any government which is reluctant to accord the people their right of access to government information is an undemocratic government, is a cowardly government, and is unworthy of the public trust. So let the surrogates and others abuse and curse and launch personal attacks as they choke on the oxygen of truth and they get blinded by the light. We don't want to hear our leaders saying that they're bad since they're born, or that they're incite already and can incite again. We don't want to hear any leader say that his predecessor ran 3 elections on the old boundaries and he gonna run 3 on them too, because he could win just as much as anybody else. That kind of bravado and braggadocio, egotistical nonsense we don't want. We don't want any of our leaders to show how big and bad they are. We don't want to hear them say they're going to sell anybody. We don't want to hear our leaders encouraging, even urging public servants to remember that it is through politics that they got their jobs. And so they must be political in order to keep their jobs. We don't want to hear that from our leaders. And any body politic which allows its leaders to speak like that and get away as leaders is undeserving of anything better and can't expect anything better and should shut up and not complain. We don't want to see public figures who have the appetite to abuse office for private gain, to insider trade and to become, they are their families and cronies and trucklers unjustly enriched. We don't want that. Well, what's so wrong with us not wanting that? Why should we want that? Why should we accept that? While we want to see them travel, we want to know what they're going out there for and what they're bringing back and how much it's costing us and who they're carrying with them and why. We need to know these things. They're going because we put them in a position. They're carrying people because we put them in a position. We have to be able to assess them on a daily basis. And the best way to assess them is to ensure that we get the full book of information on what they're doing. So it's good to hear there will be road works. Maybe good that road works will begin, that the Bastia High School works, the Cruise Pier works, all of these things might be good to hear them. But we need to know, we have the right to know, and the obligation to demand to know what our leaders' priorities of spending are. And we need and we must demand to know that those priorities are guided by a scientific and proper needs assessment exercise for our best interest, present and future, rather than a needs assessment exercise based on the political benefits and other benefits that would accrue to politicians and their cronies. Projects are good, but projects could run a country bankrupt, not only financially, but morally too, because a lot of corruption could be involved. And the best way for that to be avoided is for people to know, to have access. You hear what James Madison says. A government that doesn't share its information is a tragedy in the making. Elections are coming soon. Projects. People who get government contracts might be inclined to show their appreciation by funding activities and events that would help keep the incumbents in. Will it increase economic activity? Yes, result in jobs for more people. What's the priority with these projects? Political sustenance of the incumbents? Enrichment of a few? Or the best interests of the country? I'm not against projects. I'm all for development, but based on sensible, realistic, and just priorities. And bearing in mind that I'm saying this as a general proposition, not location specific. I'm not accusing anybody of anything at this time, or maybe at any time. But we need to be very watchful. We need to be very careful. And at this point in time, we need to take a break. Sandra, welcome back. Now, later on, time permitting, I'll open the lines and you can call in and make comments, ask questions on matters that have been raised here tonight. And you know our formula, our approach. Succinct, above board, respectful, constructive, responsible, and mature. Now, Ray and Rara inside the operating room, we have to be careful because we're using surgical tools and we don't want to hurt the patient. We want to help the patient. Now, last week, the Parliament sat and I think they did a first reading of a bill entitled the National Assembly Elections Amendment Bill. And that has been creating some conversation, causing some conversation in the public square, more especially from the opposition who appear to be against it. What are they trying to introduce in the Parliament? Well, the parent act, the original act, is the National Assembly Elections Act. It's Chapter 2.01 of the Laws of the Federation. They are including in the definition of election officers enumerators, people who go around and check for houses and registered voters and so. And in the definition section of the Act, addressing qualifying address, whereas the present legislation says that qualifying address means, and I'm reading it, a person's address in a constituency which is his or her ordinary residence or domicile in accordance with Section 37A or 37B of this Act. The new definition deletes or domicile, so it would read, and also deletes 37B. So qualifying address means a person's, once this act is passed, this bill is passed into law, and it has not yet been. But that's the intention of the government. Qualifying address would mean a person's address in a constituency, which is his or her ordinary residence in accordance with Section 37A. Now, Section 37A speaks about ordinary residence. For the purpose of registration under this Act, a person shall be deemed to reside in the constituency where he or she has been ordinarily resident on the registration date. That's what 37A reads now. But there is an intention to replace, let me not get ahead of myself. There's an amendment to Section 37, which I will come to. Let me go to it now. So 37A here in the present Act says that the person is once a person shall be deemed to reside in a constituency where he or she was ordinarily resident on the registration date. This new amendment changes that to say a person shall be deemed to reside in the constituency where he or she was ordinarily resident for at least 6 months prior to the registration date. 6 months before. In other words, they are introducing a residential requirement, 6 months. It is clear that the intention is to end overseas voting and to tighten up on the constituency voting principles which apply in our system. The amendment to Section 37 is, and I don't have a problem with that, mind you, I used to, but I don't. I went through that and I thought about it. And I don't believe that simply because you're a citizen means you have an absolute right to vote or to do anything. None of your constitutional rights are absolute, nor are any of your legal rights for that matter. They are always subjected to the public interest and to the rights of others. The amendment to Section 37, subsection 1, it says, subject to this act and any other enactment imposing any disqualifications for registration as a voter, a person is qualified to be registered as a voter for a constituency if on the registration date or enumeration date, they'll be sending out people to do enumerations, he or she is a citizen of St. Christopher Nevis, 18 years old or upwards, ordinarily resident in St. Christopher Nevis, ordinarily resident, okay? And B, a Commonwealth citizen, not being a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, 18 years or upwards, who has been ordinarily resident in St. Christopher Nevis for a continuous period of at least 3 years immediately before the registration. Presently, it's for Commonwealth citizens, 1 year residence. This is purporting to change it to 3 years before you can qualify as a Commonwealth citizen. My personal view is that a constitutional amendment should be effected to broaden it beyond just Commonwealth citizens. If an American citizen or a German citizen or somebody from Brazil or wherever is resident in the country, and I believe the period of time should be the same period that it takes to become a permanent resident. I think it's 7 years, but I could be wrong. I think that was shortened. Wherever you're from outside of St. Kitts and Nevis, that's my view. If you're resident here for that specified period of time, you should be eligible to vote, not just Commonwealth citizens. And that would take a constitutional amendment, which can be done in the Parliament with a 2/3 majority. But I don't believe the government, the administration, will get the support of the opposition. Nor would they get the support of the opposition if they try to change the Bryan Clause, which the government of yesterday, which was in office for nearly 20 years, had ample opportunity to change, including other constitutional problems, and they did none. So 37, as it stands, had 4 categories of persons who would be eligible for registration, and now they're cutting it down to 2. The 4 that exist in the original legislation: a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, 18 or upwards, ordinarily resident here. B, a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, 18 or upwards, whose name appears in the register of voters for constituency and who is ordinarily resident overseas and has a domicile in St. Christopher Nevis in accordance with 37(1)B. I'm sorry, 37(b)(1). Well, 37(b)(1) in the Parent Act deals with domicile, but that is being removed, and there's nothing constitutionally wrong with doing so. There's nothing constitutionally wrong. And even if I am wrong on this, then this could be done by a constitutional amendment, except that the administration will not get the support of the opposition. I've heard some people say that you can't do this, it's unconstitutional. I respectfully disagree. The third branch is a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, 18 or upwards, who is ordinarily resident overseas and has a domicile in St. Christopher and Nevis in accordance with 37B2. Well, that's out of the window also. So the overseas vote, the intention, among other things, is to dispense with the overseas vote. People will have their views on that. I believe the overseas vote is a major source of corruption in our politics. Not because of the voters who are coming in, but because of the way they are brought in. And there is bribery and corruption in it. Nobody has been charged, nobody's been convicted. But in addition to that, the people who finance these charters and these flights for people to come in, to help the politicians win, the chosen politicians to win, always want their pound of flesh back. And that creates a quid pro quo arrangement between the contributors, the financial contributors, and the politicians. And it leaves the people out in the cold. And that needs to be stopped. Amendment of Section 37A. You remember I told you 37A spoke about the expression ordinarily resident in St. Kitts and Nevis on the registration date. Is changing to ordinarily resident for at least 6 months before the registration date. Section 37B, to do with domicile, is totally removed. They're adding now to Section 43, the Register of Voters, a Section 43A, which deals with enumeration, and it says that notwithstanding the provisions of 43.1, which says, the Chief Registration Officer shall cause to be prepared and published, not later than 31st day of January in every year, a register of voters for each constituency. 43A1 says, notwithstanding the provisions of 43.1, which I just read, the minister may prescribe an enumeration period by order published in the Gazette for the purpose of preparing the register of voters for each constituency. 43A2, the minister may extend an enumeration period by order published in the Gazette. He may set up a period, he may extend it. And 3, the terms and conditions for the purposes are set out in Schedule 8 of the bill. Now they go on to Section 121 to amend that Section 121 of the Act. And I'm going to give you guys a chance to weigh in and give your opinion. It speaks about the registration period. The Principal Act is amended in Section 121 by adding the following new subsections 5, 6, 7, and 8 immediately after 4. As I said, 121 deals with the registration period. So the new subsection 5 will be, during the registration period, the Chief Registration Officer or the Registration Officer for a constituency may establish a temporary office within each constituency and invite all persons registered as voters for a constituency to visit that office for the purpose of confirming their registration in that constituency. You remember around 2007 also there was a confirmation period, and that was when they started issuing these national ID cards. So that's subsection 5 proposed. Subsection 6 says the Chief Registration Officer or the Registration Officer for a constituency may invite scrutineers from each political party to observe the confirmation process. I have a bit of a problem with that. I don't believe that the Chief Registration Officer or the Registration Officer for a constituency should be given a discretion by saying he or she may. I think he or she must invite scrutineers from each political party to observe the confirmation process. Let it, for once and for all, be absolutely transparent. Subsection 7 proposes to say that once the period referred to in Section 1 has passed, that's the registration period, the Chief Registration Officer or the Registration Officer for a constituency may, and I believe that should be shall, invite scrutineers from each political party to participate in the process of reviewing the names of persons registered as voters for the constituency who did not confirm their registration within that period. So you're looking at those who confirmed, you're looking at those who didn't. And 8 says, for the purposes of registration, confirming and reviewing of the persons registered, the chief registration officer or the registration officer for a constituency may visit any house within the constituency to ascertain whether persons whose names appear on the list reside in the constituency or are still alive. And then the first schedule speaks about the Commonwealth citizens, which I think should be broadened, but you will need a constitutional amendment for that. And I think they should go in the Parliament and make some constitutional amendments. That clause, open it up. The Bryant clause, get rid of it. The dual nationality thing, stop it. Allow people with dual nationality to run for public office. This is a small country. Done with that nonsense. And you don't need to go to a referendum for that. 8 elected representatives can make that a reality in the Parliament very, very easily. And this is not a politically partisan thing. We need to rise above that in matters like this, and generally. So you have the oath of the enumerator and so, and the duties of enumerators, what they do. They can carry out house-to-house inquiries, verify the addresses of persons who are on the register of voters. They have to exercise care to ensure that they obtain accurate information regarding the name. They have to take precautions to ensure that they don't enumerate any person who is not qualified to vote. When making a house-to-house inquiry or when verifying an address, an enumerator shall wear and prominently display an enumerator's identification badge provided by the supervisor of elections as evidence of his or her authority to enter the premises. An enumerator who contravenes the provisions of subsection 2, the one I just read, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000. So some responsibility is being placed on these enumerators. Walk with your badge, otherwise you could be fined up to $10,000. And a person who wears an enumerator's badge without authority commits an offense. And that's an offense under section 110 of the Act. And I believe that's a very serious offense because on summary conviction, if you impersonate an enumerator on summary conviction, Quint, you could be subjected to a fine not exceeding $30,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. And on indictment, which is in the High Court, fine of $50,000 maximum or to imprisonment for 5 years, or both. So this is not a joke, it's a serious thing. The enumerator shall notify the scrutineers in writing 24 hours before the commencement of the enumeration of the times and places where he or she will start from day to day, whenever he or she proposes to conduct an inquiry house to house. He shall inform the scrutineers. He or she shall await an acknowledgement of receipt of notice from the scrutineers or secure the signature of 2 witnesses as proof of service. He shall keep the scrutineers informed of the notices issued by him. This is why they shall have scrutineers from all the parties. Make the process transparent and network it. So take out the divisiveness. Let it be done in that way. An enumerator, subsection 5, shall not, when performing his or her duties, ask any question or make any remark to any person with a view to ascertaining or to influence the political views of such person. And if an enumerator contravenes that provision, summary conviction, $100,000 or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 months or both. But this could cause a problem, Because suppose somebody wants to set up an enumerator, or 2 people in a house, and they say, we're going to set up Quint. Quint is an enumerator. And accuse Quint, go to the supervisor of election and say, quintessential, try to ascertain or influence our political views when he came upon our premises. Poor Quint could end up paying a fine he don't have, $100,000, and take a jail of 3 months. So we need to be careful with some of these provisions. And it speaks about the management, the manner of inquiry. This is in the schedule here. The inquiry, the chief registration officer for the purposes of preparing a register of voters during a period of enumeration shall A, have a house-to-house inquiry made in such polling division as to the persons entitled to be registered under the Act. So enumeration, house-to-house, but you link that in with the scrutineers and you make it imperative that they have scrutineers from all parties. I don't like the word may in the law when you really want to say shall, although sometimes it is so interpreted. I prefer to remove the doubt and the ambiguity. And they must take into account persons who have died and so forth and take them off the list. The inquiry referred to in that section which I just read shall be made by an enumerator accompanied by scrutineers. So keep the scrutineers from the parties on top, looking at the game and being able to report back to their parties. And while they're doing all this fancy stuff and good stuff with regard to electoral stuff, they should put the voters list online, digitize the whole process. So I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to read any more of that. I think I just wanted to give you a sense of, and I myself have not read the whole bill. I want to give you a sense of what is intended. You will have your views on it. There might be at variance, but this discussion is intended to hear the different views and to shed some light on the process and maybe get decision makers in a better place, and in the process get the country in a better place. So I've raised a few matters with you guys, the ones that I raised earlier and this one now. And so we're going to take a break, and after the break, I will start receiving your calls. Okay, just let me look at one last part of the bill. In Schedule 8, Clause 8, examination or objection by a scrutineer, because this is important, Quint and Gavin. 1, a scrutineer shall be entitled while a house-to-house inquiry is being conducted. Remember, scrutiny from the different parties. He or she shall be entitled to inspect all enumeration documents in his polling division. That's good. And 2, let me just finish this before we take this first call. A scrutineer may raise an objection in accordance with the provisions of Part 4 of the Act to any information in an enumeration document in his polling division. So the scrutineers do have some leverage, and I would like to give them even more. So let's take this first call. I'm sorry. I had to finish that little point, dear caller. I do apologize. So feel free to call back in, and let's continue. Okay, let's take this one. Good night. Let's try this one then. Good night.
Yeah, good night, man.
Yes.
My name is Oscar.
Yeah, good night.
Oh, how are you?
Well, it depends on what aspect of me, but thank God for life.
My name is James Davis.
Yes,
nice
sir.
meeting you. It's nice. I'm listening to you all night tonight, and I heard you talking about workers.
Yeah.
And so forth, and the courtesy of principle of knowledge. Due to the fact that you're creating on the beat of workers, I decided to call in and share my views. Because I work for the government and different things like this. Due to the fact of certain circumstances, there is certain principle of ways that then real treatment is not up to date and so forth, because then workers are now supposed to have certain medical checks and different things like this here, and they're supposed to be having safety jackets and so forth, and safety shoes and so forth, and then the workers is not having that because then we're cleaning waste, cleaning bathrooms and different things like this here. It's supposed to be properly protected and properly geared up, because then if a man like me who live in Shadwell and different things like this here, I have to go all the way to Shadwell. If rain come, I have to walk it down, in a long road if I don't have my vehicle and so forth, and different things like this. So due to the fact of this here, I'm supposed that you bring up that thing about workers. Also, I've been working for the government now for the past 45 years, something like this here, because I started working when I'm 9 years old, and so forth, and due to the fact of this here, that then it seems to me like then now I'm still, people is coming up now and passing me, and passing my salary, and I still have to train, some of them I have to train them and so forth, my little bathrooms and different things like this here.
I'm going to ask you to wind up, caller, because we have other people who want to call in, which kind of tight on time.
All right, you have a good night, man. I will call back.
Good night. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Stefan.
Yes, good night.
The strategy of the government and the surrogates is obviously to distract and discredit, and I would add demoralize and disparage and denigrate, all of which is unbecoming of a government. I could never support any government that has to resort to these nefarious tactics. Okay? You asked last week why I thought they were reluctant to bring good governance legislation, and I told you that I felt they were hiding something. I also felt that there's a reluctance also because they realize that meaningful legislation in this regard will disqualify some of them from holding office. Okay, but the country definitely needs this, so we have to keep advocating for it. I also do not like the approach to electoral reform. I mean, if anything needs careful public consultation, it is that. For we need to have public confidence in the process. I do not trust this government to be fair. I feel they're going to do things to their advantage. I really feel that the process should be bipartisan and independent. And I feel as a matter of principle, we should not take away people's rights. Okay? That includes the right to vote. If they can do it now, they should be left with it. Maybe we could have some sunset clauses, but I don't believe in taking away people's rights for anything. I agree that we need campaign finance reform, but I feel that all citizens should be allowed to vote regardless of how long they have been out or how they get here. When they go into the voting booth, only they and God know how they're going to vote. And
regardless of how they get here?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you something, sir. One of the biggest sources of corruption in our politics comes from the overseas vote arrangements, because rich people pay for those charters. And the rich people who pay for those charters have to be repaid. The right to vote is not an absolute right. There is no constitutional right that is absolute. It is subject to the public interest. And it cannot be in the public interest for elements that nurture and foment corruption to be sustained. I'm not saying that's the only one, there are others, but we're going to disagree on that. Any other points?
I'm just saying that I don't think that people are going to...
well, Mr. Bratcher was not in favor of any overseas votes, eh? You know that?
They're going to vote according to a plain right. I believe they can come and vote, and when they go in that voting booth, it's up to them. Right?
Well, let's be real, brother. Let's be real.
When you go in that booth, who knows how you're going to vote?
Oh, come on, man. Come on.
Are you saying
any other points? No, I don't want to belabor this, but that's not much of a point, brother. Okay. No, you can't guarantee, but people are not going to pay for People not going to pay for John, Mary, Joan, and Joseph to come on a plane if they're not reasonably confident. And I would say maybe 10% of those who you pay to come in, you pay them to come to vote. You pay for them to come to vote. And that has to be bribery. That has to be against the law. That alone, 90% of them will vote on that plane, whether it's a Labour plane or a PAM plane or a this plane or that plane. 90% of them. Some of them will outsmart and game the gamers,
Exactly.
but no, 90%, come on. So the 10% is not a sufficient large sample for your argument to be sustained with the greatest of respect.
There's a lot more corruption of the system on the ground here.
Well, I don't know about a lot. I would like to exorcise every element of it that pops up, and this is one. Thank you, brother.
All right, then.
Let's take some other calls. We have any calls there? Yes. Good evening. Welcome.
Pleasant good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, my brother.
Yeah. In connection with the Commonwealth voters, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the different countries in the Commonwealth, how long a Commonwealth citizen have to be resident before they can vote? I know the majority is 12 months, which is a year.
Yeah, and I think that's far too short. Our Constitution says 12 months.
Short?
Yeah, 12 months is too short. Mm-hmm. You see, you come here, you're residing here for a year, you go and register. Suppose you're working in a bank or somewhere that don't have people from, well, hardly, yeah. You come here, you work for a year. After a year and a month, you go and register. Okay?
Yeah, in
9 months later, you're transferred to Bermuda. You're on the voters list. That's a nonsense. You don't have enough skin in the game to be registrable in my book after a year. 3 years, you get in there. I would more like to think, whatever the period for permanent residence is, if you're a permanent resident, you can vote. Other than that, no.
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
I heard some talk on the radio for some months now, right? In connection with cleaning up the list. And
yeah.
Mr. Bailey said that he went to visit the university and he discovered that the name on the list, the students, them have returned to their country. Mm-hmm. And the opposition is saying that he is wrong to take off the name off the list. As a citizen of the Federation, I don't think it's fair that person who was here and voted in the last election because they was living here, now they're gone back home, they should come back in to vote and decide a government for us. They're not a citizen of St. Kitts Nevis.
Well, to begin with,
thanks for your time. I'll hang up and listen.
To begin with, my interpretation of the Immigration Act classifies such persons as what you call permitted entrants. And although a court of competent jurisdiction ruled that those students were eligible to register, I disagree with that, but it's the law. Now, it makes a nonsense of it for them to have finished their period of study in St. Kitts and Nevis. They've gone back to their country or they've gone forward somewhere else to continue their studies. They have no interest in St. Kitts and Nevis. Why should their name be on the voters list? In fact, I don't know the exact provision, but I think there's a provision in the Act that empowers the supervisor of election to remove the names of such persons who have been absent from the Federation for a certain period of time. So I don't know what the argument of the opposition is, what they're arguing for in terms of that. I really don't understand that one. We have any calls, Quint? No calls. Okay, so I'm going to see if I could find that section because I don't remember exactly which one it is. But it makes no sense. People who come here to study, Commonwealth citizens, they register to vote, which I don't think they should be allowed to. They leave. Why would their names remain on the list? They've left. Why should the name be on the list? There's no reason for the name to be on the list. That doesn't make sense. Unless somebody wants to play with that name. That doesn't make sense either. And that needs to be, all of these things need to be cleaned up. I like the idea of the scrutineers from all of the different parties. And the scrutineers can raise objections to any information in an enumeration document. They can raise objections. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Stefan, you see, the policies in the Federation, then politicians is politics us. And we are the alone to understand these things. We are the alone to understand that then we as human beings in the Federation, we as poor people and so forth, we have a certain level to live and so forth. And then the system now, the white collar guys, people like the lawyers, the doctors, prime ministers, and different things like that. They look down on we and the lower class people and tell us that we bums, because then we cleaners, and different things like this. And they look down to us and tell us that then, hey, no, because I have more money than you, I'm better than you. Because I have a car and I have a Jeep, I'm better than you. But at the same day now, they're still going to come back to the cleaners to ask them to do certain work for them. And different things like this. This part political science came in. And this is part now, the politician now tell themselves that then, when 5 years now, they're going to come on to you now and try to fool you again for another 5 years. And different things like this. And then they're after the 5 years, after the year, they don't get it. They're gone again and left you. And then they forget you. You understand? People got to learn to understand that then nobody is better than nobody.
Indeed.
No politician and nobody who have money is better than nobody. We all got to try to live together and unite together and make our country be proud and be clean. I work between some people and...
You're going to have to wind up, brother. You're going to have to wind up. You're going to have to wind up. We're running very short on time. Okay. Sorry about that. I think that caller got caught. But we had the calls have to be brief because we don't have a lot of time, and I want to give as many people an opportunity as possible. Now, on the 6-month residency thing in the constituency, we have a constituency system. Why is it that you're a resident, let me call a place, in Sandy Point and want to be registered in East Bastille? We have a constituency system, and that system is governed by certain principles, one of which is you resident in a constituency. If you want to vote there, you have to qualify to vote in that constituency. So you have to be resident in it for a specified period of time. What could be wrong with that? It would avoid people playing with the system. This is another way to clean the mess that exists in the system. Some people thrived on the existence of the mess. This effort, in my opinion, seeks to clean that up, and it should be lauded and supported and encouraged. Why would people want things to be cloudy when clear is better, unless cloudiness is what they thrive in and love? You live in a constituency genuinely, and everybody, no question about it, you live in that constituency. That's where you must vote. Thank you. Let's take this call.
Yes, good night to the Honorable Minister.
Good night.
Mr. Minister, I've been listening to the program since it started, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But what shocked me is when the caller was speaking about people coming to vote and in a polling station, we don't care how they come or whatever. We've been speaking about this here ever so long. When Dr. Kennedy Alphonse Timmons started wanting people to vote, I was never against it. I was against it. You cannot tell me people out in England, Canada, and America want to come in to give me a government, and they do not know anything about thinking. This time, that we move on into a new slave.
Mm-hmm.
People want to come into work, to vote, they have to wait 6 months. We speak about it all the time, and we've been talking about it. And I cannot understand how some people feel take tax money.
Remember, my friend.
I'm bringing people to vote.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Different people have different opinions, and they have reasons for their opinions. Okay? I agree with you. And guess what? Robert Bratcher would have agreed with you as well he would not have been in favor of the overseas vote. It was introduced in the, I think, 1984 by the PAM NRP government. The Labour government originally was against it. The Labour Party was against it. Later on, the Labour Party was for it. PAM and its associates were for it, and now PAM and its associates are against it. Labour was against it, and Labour is now for it. You understand me? So we can't look at this thing as a tool of convenience for our own political benefit. We have to look at it in its entirety to see if it serves the best interests of the people. And I think any sober and fair analysis of the overseas vote would indicate overwhelmingly that it is contrary to the best interests of clean, corrupt-free politics in the country. It is one of the major sources of political contamination in the country and a disservice to the people of the country, because the politicians become so beholden to the contributors, to those airplanes, to those charters, that it causes them to neglect their ability to provide fully the services to the people. The people are neglected in the process, and that must not be allowed. Thank you for your call. So, let's take this call. Good evening. Okay. Next call. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Dwyer.
Good evening.
It's not everybody come down to think it's on those free plane to vote. I can speak for myself. When I come think it's to vote, I come on my own dime. And I don't believe nobody should have that right to take that away from me. When I come thinking, I vote where I live. I grew up in Connery, and that's why I say I've never lived another place in Sinkis. And I have no desire to live no place. I can't even imagine living any place else in Sinkis but Connery. Even if I had money pouring out my ears. I have no desire to live no place else in my country but Connery. And I don't think anybody should have that right to take that away from me, because people coming in my country and they can vote. It's not everybody dishonest. And I campaign on Win FM. Stay here in America and campaign for my party family. Let me tell you, anybody want to take on my vote, I'm going to campaign against them on Win FM. You have a good day.
A good evening.
A good night, I should say.
You too, my friend. You too. You're expressing your view passionately, and that is your right, and that's what it's all about. I happen to disagree with you. Not anybody taking away your right. Your right is not an absolute right. And the residential requirement precludes overseas voting. And I think this is the intention of the administration. And I happen to agree. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Dwyer Astafan.
Good evening.
That lady just gave me a big, massive joke.
Okay.
But Dwyer, let's get serious.
Well, I'm serious, you know. I don't need to get serious. I'm serious already.
Hello?
I'm serious already.
No. Yeah, I understand.
Oh, okay.
I listened to a caller before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about the overseas voters and people coming in to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting, Mr. Dwyer Astafan.
Mm-hmm.
To listen to him say that. But then the other side, I'm going to flip the coin. There's a call from Mountstrat.
Uh-huh.
And he's deep into Sinkit politics.
Mm-hmm.
He has nothing to do with Sinkit. He don't know where Basta be and this kind of stuff. But yet, the same caller defend that caller. I think that's also wrong.
Okay,
that's
well,
Mr. Dwyer Astafan. Hello?
That is, but is that relevant to what we're discussing?
Well, kind of, because you see, I'm saying we must be even across the board.
But you know, he's not the only person who might not know where Bastia is. You have people who come in here on planes at elections. You have people who come in here at elections. Listen to me.
Yeah.
You have people who come in here on planes to vote at election. They don't know where Bastia is either.
Hear me, Mr. Dwyer. I'm for that. That's what I'm saying to you.
Okay, brother.
But I'm trying to show you on the other side, I'm very passionate I be also about Sinkit in general.
Okay.
Because the same way you're saying our people shouldn't come home to vote, you're right. But the same way I'm saying also, it is not fair for people who have not contributed, have nothing to do with my country, to be making a decision on where my country should go.
Mm-hmm.
Example, like when Timothy went to St. Vincent. I think that was disrespectful.
No, that's not. We're not discussing that, brother. Stick on this.
Yeah, but I'm just
You're
saying that
very
all
welcome
of
to
the
discuss
fact
what we're
that
discussing,
you can
man.
be the same over-
Don't go outside of the line, man. Stay in your lane.
Well, maybe you want to look at it that, but that's just
No, fair enough, fair enough. And I like
your.
your.
Just say, I think it's unfair, but as the lady said, though, I think she feel a little bit hurt because she campaigned hard for her party, and I think it's a slap in the face. Have a good night.
All right. Well, opinions differ, but all of us are people the same way, And I don't trust people who agree with everything I say, because they can't help me learn. I believe, I used to agree that the overseas vote was a good thing, but generally is more a bad thing than a good thing, in my opinion, because it corrupts politicians and it compromises the best interests of the people living here. Because when you're busy paying off the rich man who give you the money to bring the plane and giving him all kind of deals, sweetheart deals and so, and when he crack the whip, you have to jump. It compromises the people. It compromises the dignity of the high office, which is at stake in the elections. And when those who occupy the high office become the stool pigeons, the trucklers for the money people, then you don't expect them to respect the ordinary men and women of the country. And sad to say, we've been seeing evidence of this for years in this country, where people come in here with a few dollars, some of them not even with a few dollars, and they treat the people with nothing but disdain because they feel they have the ear of decision makers. Good evening. We're going to wrap up very shortly. Good evening.
Yes, good evening again. Mr. Astafan, the problem to me is not the fact that people can come home to vote. The problem to me is the plane ride, and I keep saying it. And if people did not have that plane ride, eliminate that like I tell Patches, and let's see how much people is going to buy their ticket and go home to vote. That is really the big problem, is the free plane ride. Address that.
So who's going
to
eliminate the free plane ride?
All of y'all who started it, the government who started it, all of y'all do it. Your party do it. The party after do it.
No, hold on. Don't get overworked.
All of y'all did it, Mr. Astafan.
Oh Lord, I'm not saying I didn't do
what
it.
I realize in Sinkis is when people out, something is an inconvenience. But when
No. Don't try that. You don't try that. You don't try that. You cool out. Don't try that. Wait, no, hold on.
You see, you talk about people going from
can I talk?
constituency to constituency.
Can I talk?
Remember when you won your seat is Mr. Simmons, this cheat, they cheat. They move people from Labour stronghold, put them in your constituency in order for you to win. Don't go there. You see, when y'all in power, it's all right. But when you're out now, I get self-righteous. You see me, I'm not fake. I'm real. You have a good night, Mr. Astafan.
Don't go yet. Don't go. Hold on. Listen to me now. I listen to you.
Yeah.
All of us have used the overseas vote. PAM use it, Labour use it, everybody use it. Wait, hold on a second. I find you being a little bit aggressive because no, it's my turn to talk. When you talk, I shut up. No, you need to shut up. Let me talk because I shut up when you talk. Take it easy. When you all come out, all you become righteous. I was part of a system. I am admitting it. I used to support it. I've come to learn. If you want to say, like Saul getting an epiphany, I've come to learn that the overseas vote through these charters and so is not a healthy thing for the country, for the cleanliness. Let me finish.
So that is why I...
No, hold on. You're going to have to let me finish or I'm going to cut you. Which one you want? Okay, let me finish. It is not the best thing for the country. It's not me trying to be self-righteous. I was part of it. And you said cheating took place for me to win? Did cheating take place for Dr. Simmons to win? So let's not go there. We learn from our mistakes, or we should learn from our mistakes. We need to go forward. No government is going to pass a law banning charters. You have to stop the overseas vote. That's simple as it. Thank you very much.
Why can't they stop the charters?
How are they going to stop the charters? By which law? You're going to stop a charter from coming into a country? By which law? How are you going to do that? It's not, you're not being practical.
They all fall back on and integrity and honesty.
Oh, really?
And
And
it's all on people on a whole.
Uh-huh.
And if people have integrity and they're honest, nobody can use them. You see, no one can use me.
Well, that has proven. That's
just me.
That has proven unsuccessful. That has proven unsuccessful. Depending on people's honesty and integrity, will not work in people chartering planes for people to fly in here on. And people going to take the free ride and they're going to vote and put on the shirt. And that makes really an abomination of the entire process. Thank you very much for being so assertive and passionate. I disagree with you, and I respect your right to disagree with me. We're going to take one last call, and then we're going to play some music and go home. Hello?
Yes, good night.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the fan?
Good night.
In reference to the overseas voting, I would like to suggest that maybe they can have a representative for the people who live overseas and the voting. Let them vote for a representative to have someone to represent them instead of just probably just taking away.
Okay, so you're telling me now, the people who are overseas, they live in Leeds, they live in Birmingham, they live in Manchester, they live in Philadelphia, they live in Miami. All of them must vote. I don't know where they will vote. I don't know who will administer that election.
Right.
I mean, that will take an intellectual exercise of all of the brightest people who have ever lived to make that work, madam. And I don't know if that's a very feasible proposition, as noble as it sounds.
Well, I mean, if these people are on the list and they're coming in to vote anyway, I mean, they're on the
So who's going to pay
voters
for them
list,
to vote?
so they're
Who's going to pay
coming
for them to come in?
vote.
Who's going to pay for them to come in?
Well, no. I'm just saying to you that right now, we're saying that and we bring them in to vote. So I'm saying, like, people who are registered to vote on the voters list, give them that right where they could vote overseas. I mean, we have
Yes,
our
but the
embassies
question is,
embassies.
The question is, people, you have a high commission in London.
Right.
You have
of course.
petitions and divisions living in Dubai, in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Africa, in India, in several parts of the United States and Canada, and elsewhere in the Caribbean and beyond. If you could come up with a way that would show something like that is feasible and practical and economically viable, then I think you'll get maybe a Nobel Prize for something. That to me is a gargantuan task that I wouldn't want to be charged with solving that problem. But I understand what you're saying, and this is going to upset some people, but you have to do what you think is in the best interest of the country. And in my opinion, the administration is doing the right thing by seeking to end the overseas vote, because it is one of the major sources of corruption and compromise of services to the people of this country. Not the fault of the voters, maybe the fault of some of them who come in just to pass we said, just for the lime, they ride, they vote and go back. But sometimes, you have to do things like this, unfortunately, and it arouses people's passion, which is good. But let's not be enemies at the end of the day. God bless. Thank you all very much. Next time, I hope to have a lady in here with me.